Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, it's time to go over the results of my themed Letterboxd 4 series for the month of June, which was Pride Month. Now, a quick rundown if you're new to this series. Basically what this series is just that every month I take a different theme, a different category, and I take a look at what my Letterboxd 4 within that specific category is. So, for example, we've done Best Picture winners, we've done comedies, we've done sports, so you can go back and there's a playlist with this video in it and the rest of those videos if you want to take a look at any of those. But basically how the series works is just there's a video at the beginning of the month where we take a look at the preview, where I give you my initial, like what my current Letterboxd 4 is, and then throughout that month I watch a whole bunch of movies, a bunch of films that just fit in that category, and we just take a look and see if by the end of the month if I have a new Letterboxd 4. Now, I'll tell you something, a little spoiler. So usually in a lot of those previous videos, one, maybe two changes a month, and I think that's it. I don't think there's been a month where nothing changes, and there's maybe only been one month where there's like two changes. This month I had like three changes. I watched a whole lot of new films this month, a lot of films I was really excited about, and had a blast really with this video. So there's a lot of change that's coming to the final Letterboxd 4 at the end of the video. But before we get to the Letterboxd 4, we do have to take a look at just everything I watched. So here are the honorable mentions, all of the films that I watched this month that didn't quite crack the Letterboxd 4. Starting with a couple honorable mentions that I watched in the last couple months. Tangerine. I watched Tangerine last year for the first time, and again a couple months ago for my Sean Baker ranked video, which should be on the channel in the next week or two. I may not be the biggest Sean Baker fan, but there's no denying that he does an excellent job of highlighting marginalized communities. It is great seeing two transgender actresses leading a film, and Kitiana Kiki Rodriguez and Maya Taylor deliver excellent performances. Bottoms. I watched this a couple months ago for my comedy Letterboxd 4, but when you're marketed as Lesbian Fight Club, you absolutely fit here as well. Without a doubt, the funniest movie included in today's video. Rachel Sennett and Iowa Debris deliver phenomenal comedic performances that are also packed with a little heart. Now for the films I watched this month. God's Own Country. This felt very similar to Ammonite to me, which is also directed by Francis Lee. Josh O'Connor and Alex Akerinu do an excellent job of portraying a relationship that is at times cold to each other, but also full of passion as the relationship blossoms. It didn't fully reach the emotional heights I was hoping for, but I had a good time. Paris is Burning. My favorite documentaries are always the ones that aren't as focused on telling a narrative story as much as they are about following the lives of interesting people. Paris is Burning is a celebration of queer society and is fun and full of energy. I absolutely see why this is at the top of so many lists of LGBTQ films and is definitely a must-see. But I'm a cheerleader. I had a lot of fun with this, but in a weird way, I wish it was even more over the top. There were a couple gags that made me laugh out loud, but some that I didn't think went far enough. Having never seen this before, I was expecting non-stop jokes, but it really was the heart of the third act that makes this a film that so many love. Challengers. This is the third time I've seen this year, and it delivers every single time. Zendaya, Mike Feist, and Josh O'Connor all give powerhouse performances, with the gay tension between Feist and O'Connor captivating. I really could have watched more Luca Guadagnino films this month, because he really is a master at celebrating the LGBTQ community throughout his films. Flea. A couple years ago, Flea was nominated for Best Documentary, Best Animated Film, and Best International Film at the Oscars, and somehow didn't win a single one. It's a very emotional film telling the story of a refugee who is not only fighting for his and his family's survival, but also discovering his own sexuality. It is a beautiful film that I recommend you check out if you missed it. I Saw the TV Glow. I've talked about this film a couple times on the channel now, but I think I've liked it more and more each time I watch it. I used to really not like Justice Smith as an actor, but this was the performance that made me completely switch how I view him. The film also works so effectively due to the emotional connection director Jane Schoenbrunn and star Jack Haven have to the transgender themes. The Rocky Horror Picture Show. I know I owe this another rewatch in the future, because it really didn't work for me the way I know it has for so many people. I do regret watching this by myself, as opposed to with a sold-out audience, the way it was intended to be seen. Susan Sarandon is excellent, but Tim Curry is extraordinary as Dr. Frankenfurter. Disobedience. I didn't know much about this film going into it, other than knowing it had Rachel Weisz and Rachel McAdams. I was blown away by their chemistry in this, which I should have expected with two amazing actresses. Films about faith and personal desires always have a strong impact on me. Milk. I was not familiar with the story of Harvey Milk, so I was expecting to get the typical politician biopic that very briefly touches on who they were. While there are a fair amount of those elements here, there is also an extraordinary amount of heart that makes for some very emotional moments. I also wasn't very familiar with Sean Penn as an actor before this, so I was very impressed with his commitment to the role. Tar. I didn't get as into this film as so many others did a couple years ago, but what I was very much into was Cate Blanchett's performance. It's a shame that Tar ran into the Everything Everywhere All at Once buzzsaw that year at the Oscars, because Blanchett would have won Best Actress in nearly any other ceremony. While the majority of the films I watched this month are a celebration of the community, there is no denying the stories like this that exist featuring a member of the community abusing their power over those that they are interested in. The Birdcage. I didn't realize this was an American remake of La Cage aux Folles until the end of the film, otherwise I would have watched that first. The late Robin Williams and the late Gene Hackman each deliver solid performances, but it's Nathan Lane that steals the show each time he is on screen. Some of the jokes didn't always work for me, and I think I realized why when I watched the original film. La Cage aux Folles. Like I said, I didn't realize The Birdcage was a remake of this. I also didn't realize that while not a shot-for-shot remake, The Birdcage essentially takes the majority of its lines and jokes straight from La Cage aux Folles. Everything felt more natural here, so I enjoyed the original more than the remake. Pain and Glory. Several years ago, this was the first Pedro Almodovar film that I had seen. Having seen a few more over the years, I absolutely love his style and his ability to deliver intimate characters full of depth. Antonio Banderas stars as a man who is at a low point, but reminiscing on his past desires brings out the light in him. My Own Private Idaho. I'm not super familiar with River Phoenix's filmography, but the chemistry he had here with Keanu Reeves is special. I also didn't realize this was an adaptation of a Shakespeare play, but I kind of got the hint during a couple of Reeves's monologues. I do wonder if I would have enjoyed the film more if I was familiar with Henry IV, but I still enjoyed this a great deal. The Wedding Banquet. The only 2025 entry in this month's video. I haven't seen the Ang Lee film that this is based off, so I don't know how similar the stories are, but there are multiple twists in this film that felt newer for this adaptation. It is nice to see Lily Gladstone again, and her owning a Certain Women DVD was a funny blink and you'll miss it joke. Glenn or Glenda. At times, it feels like a film that's sole purpose is to be a crash course on LGBTQ issues, but it occasionally has inspired moments. Telling the stories of a trans woman and a pseudo-hermaphrodite, the film often feels outdated, but I imagine it was better fit for the 50s when it was released. The ending wasn't quite as neat as I would have liked, but I love the decision to leave it with a challenge to the audience to change their hearts if needed. My Beautiful Laundrette. I know what I'm about to say is blasphemous, but this is the first time I've seen a Daniel Day-Lewis film. His chemistry with Gordon Warnecke is great, even if their relationship wasn't as fleshed out as I would have liked. The film has a lot of big ideas, but it didn't click all the way for me. Philadelphia. In a long line of excellent performances in his career, this may be my favorite Tom Hanks performance. A very important story based on the lives of some very brave men standing up for what is right. At times, I was glad that we've moved past a lot of the hateful stereotypes portrayed in the film, but there were other moments that felt all too familiar with how the world feels about gay people today. Victor Victoria. There are scenes in this film that are as fun as any scene I saw in a film this month, but the story feels too stretched out for the lengthy runtime. A trio of great performances from the three leads, but it is Julie Andrews as the titular Victor and Victoria that steals the show. While I question if anyone is actually falling for the woman pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman shtick, the premise is still a blast. Now, like I said at the beginning of the video, there was a lot of change this month in terms of what was in the Letterboxd for at the beginning of the month versus now, so let's take a look at the 3 films that are leaving the Letterboxd for. All of Us Strangers. Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal are no doubt excellent in the film, but it's Claire Foy and Jamie Bell's roles that really hit hard in this film for me. This is the only film of Andrew Haig's that I've seen, but I can tell he is a passionate director full of style and substance. I love this film more on a second watch than I did a couple years ago, so it didn't fall out of the Letterboxd for that reason. There was just a lot of new competition. Close. It had been a couple years since I had seen this, and I definitely remembered the homosexual themes being more definitive than they are. There is certainly a case for reading the film as representing repressed homosexual feelings, but since it isn't the primary focus of the film, I didn't feel like it fits the criteria for this category. It is still a beautiful and tragic film that I love, and one that I recommend you seek out. Rocketman. Elton John is no doubt an LGBTQ icon, and his involvement in the project kept his representation as accurate and as respectful as possible. I have always been a big Elton John fan, so I've always felt I was biased to this film, but as time goes on, I can't deny that this film does the musician biopic better than most of the others in the genre. This was the hardest film to leave out of the Letterboxd for, but I think there's a good chance it could return in a future episode. And now let's take a look at that Letterboxd for. Brokeback Mountain. In 1960s Wyoming, two men develop a strong emotional and sexual relationship that endures as a lifelong connection, complicating their lives as they get married and start families of their own. The film won 3 Oscars at the 2006 Academy Awards: Best Director for Ang Lee, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Original Score. It was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor for Heath Ledger, Best Supporting Actor for Jake Gyllenhaal, Best Supporting Actress for Michelle Williams, and Best Cinematography. Brokeback Mountain was released in 2005 and was directed by Ang Lee. The film stars Heath Ledger, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Michelle Williams. Now, the whole point of this series, or at least in terms of the films that, that I'm watching throughout the month to see if they have a chance at cracking into Letterboxd for, the fun of it for me is getting a chance to watch a bunch of new films for the first time. There's been a couple of the previous episodes where a film cracks into the Letterboxd for, and it was one that I had already seen, but one that I just loved a whole lot more on an additional watch. This video is fun because 3 of the 4, the 3 new entries, they're all first watches for me. And it seems crazy to say that I just hadn't seen Brokeback Mountain to this point in my life, and it wasn't necessarily due to anything about like not wanting to see the film, as much as it was just one of those films that we all have those blind spots, these films that we missed. At this point when this came out in 2005, I was a little too young. Parents probably wouldn't have let me watch it, and then it just, as I grew older, I just kind of passed it, and I just never got around to watching it. So I'm so glad I finally did, because I've heard great things about the film, and I know so many people love it, and so I was really excited to finally give it this a watch and see how I felt about it. And it was really fun kind of going into this watch, again, knowing that so many other people love it, but also knowing that that's about it. Like, that was all I really knew about the film. I didn't know, essentially the extent of my knowledge of the film going into it was it's the gay cowboy film. Like, that is just what, especially when it came out. At this point, I would have been, what would I have been? 11 when this came out. And so if you did hear anyone talking about it, that's just all it got reduced down to. And even today, that is still how some people, especially people that don't know the film, that's just how they refer to it. And for me, I just I knew that, and then I knew the actors. I knew Heath Ledger, I knew Jake Gyllenhaal, and then I knew Anne Hathaway and Michelle Williams were in it, but I didn't know to what, level they were in it. And so for me, going into this, I really was just kind of expecting a film that, I guess, kind of similar in a sense to like an Ammonite, or I'm trying to think of maybe kind of like a Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Kind of like, I thought that this was going to be a more isolated thing, that we were going to watch a whole story about these two, and maybe Anne Hathaway and Michelle Williams, maybe their involvement was more so in flashbacks. Maybe that's how they're introduced in the movie, because I thought that the whole film was going to take place on Brokeback Mountain with these two. Like, I thought it was just going to be this kind of, maybe I did think it was a little bit more Portrait of a Lady on Fire-ish, where it was just kind of this slow burn, and then kind of this big climax kind of in the third act, when the romance fully blossoms, and that's when they're fully kind of together. So I was kind of shocked when I was watching this to see just how quickly the relationship formed between the two, and then I was shocked at how quickly we were off Brokeback Mountain, where we just kind of left. And so I got this experience watching this film of not really knowing what was going to happen in kind of the last half or so of the film, maybe 2/3 of the film, where they're home and they're with their families, and we just watch as the decades are just rolling by and time is just escaping from these two very quickly, and you just see the pain that kind of having to just try and live a normal life, as they try and move on and start these families, and everything that the pain that is going through between the two of them while they are essentially just being separated in this, really just created a way more emotional of an experience than I was expecting. Again, I was expecting an emotional story because I know so many people love this, and I had heard that it's emotional, but I was just kind of expecting the emotion to come in a different way. And so to get that whole second act, especially the third act of the film, where it is just this very intimate drama about these two, and the kind of the times that they are able to kind of sneak out together and still kind of share moments together, but also just kind of feeling that agony and the pain of they just can't quite make it work. They can't come all the way together just was very kind of a painful and strangely beautiful conclusion really to this film. And so there was so much about Brokeback Mountain, again, just for the intimacy, how intimate this story is, how beautifully portrayed all of these characters are. Everything was just firing on all cylinders for me, and I really loved Brokeback Mountain. Desert Hearts. While waiting for her divorce papers, a repressed literature professor finds herself unexpectedly attracted by a carefree, spirited young woman named Kay. Desert Hearts was released in 1985 and was directed by Donna Deitch. The film stars Helen Shaver, Patricia Charbonneau, and Audra Lindley. So out of the four that are in my final Letterboxd 4 here, I had at least heard of three of them, right, before this month and before getting into this. This one, Desert Hearts, is one that I had not heard of at all. And I think this is a good time to mention as well. I mentioned it in the preview video at the beginning of the month, but I think it's a good time to mention it now, that a solid 10 plus films probably that I've talked about in this video, I got the inspiration to see them from Alonso Duralde's book, Hollywood Pride, a celebration of LGBTQ plus representation and perseverance in film, which I was able to listen to, the audiobook while I was at work at the beginning of the month, and I had, and on my phone I had the notepad out, and I was able to just, write down every single film that just piqued my interest, and there was a whole bunch of them. Probably the list ended up being over 100 films long, and and in this book he talks about more than that, so I recommend you check out this book as well, because there was just so many great films and people and stories that were told in the book. But there was a couple of these that stood out to me, and one of them was Desert Hearts, and it was one that I again hadn't seen, hadn't heard anything about, but I just thought like, oh, it sounds like a good fun time, like let me go and check it out. And what happened was I watched this film, and during the first, the beginning of the film, there was a lot of it where it was kind of, I don't want to say slow, maybe a little bit slower, but there were kind of moments where, I was not really fully bought into the characters, not really fully bought into maybe the characterizations of some of them, and there was a lot of plots, a lot of, different stories and things that I was like, I don't, it's fun, but I don't know if it's all coming together for me. And something happens in this film, really, again, in like the second half, but really kind of the third act, where this film just goes to a different level, where I am, for the first half or so, you're charmed, and there's a couple things here and there. And then by that third act, I was just like infatuated with our romance here between, between this teacher and then the description says the young spirited woman named Kay, and you're able to just see this kind of taboo relationship where there's kind of these moments where I wonder if this film maybe is a little bit more of a product of its time, where some of the things that Kay is trying to do to, to seduce our main character. I wish I had her name written down. I don't think I have it in. Yeah, it doesn't say it in the description, but kind of seducing our main character. There's kind of these moments where I was watching being like, she's kind of being a little firm here, like she's saying no, but she's just very persuasive. And so there's these moments where I'm like, I don't know, like some of this just she's a little pushy, it's not feeling right. And then all of a sudden, once it clicks, once they are like together, you get this third act that is just magical. And when I say magical, what I mean is just like there's these moments, and especially in the dialogue. One thing that I've learned, especially in a romance film, is I am a sucker for just one-liners and dialogue and just super romantic quotes. And this film is full of them. There's, I wish I had it memorized, but the whole it's when the lady that's kind of running the ranch, that's over the whole thing, she first says it, where she's talking about how her husband reached into her heart and untangled, I can't remember exactly, untangled the cords, or something along those lines. And then Kay is able to kind of mirror that exact quote back to her at the end of the film. Like, that was just like a very romantic quote. The line when they're about to have sex for the first time, and our main character, our teacher, she says like she wouldn't know what to do, and then she says, well, the first thing you do is put the do not disturb sign on the door. Like, there's just these lines that just kind of like make you kind of like gasp, because it's just so romantic in the way that it is delivered in the film. And then the probably the most romantic line, at least to me, of the whole film, is right at the end of the film, when I guess it's a little bit of a spoiler if you haven't seen this film, that it seems like they're about to kind of part ways as she's hopping on the train and is going out, and she's begging Kay to get on the train and be with her, and she's like, well, we're not going to settle, because they're talking about their future, and she's like, we're not going to settle anything in the next 40 minutes, so what do you want? Like, what do you want me to get on the train for? We're not going to settle anything in these 40 minutes. And she essentially just says, I want 40 more minutes with you. And it's just this line that, like, again, every time, each time these romantic lines are just hitting, it just, like, I'm smiling, like, I'm getting more happy with, like, all of these line deliveries, and everything is just, I'm swooning basically for this film. And the film kind of ends there. And again, this is something that I've talked about multiple times on my channel, that I am a sucker for a film with a good ending. Like, any film that, if it just nails the ending, it instantly, like, bumps it up a whole star for me on my Letterboxd rating. It's just one of those things that any film that has an excellent ending, I just love. And Desert Hearts might be one of my favorite endings. Like, it is such a romantic and just whimsical and just beautiful final moment, kind of this send off to our characters, to the point that I had this thought, and then I saw a whole bunch of people, this was their most common, like, the most common Letterboxd review was people saying that this film is 40 minutes too short. Like, we needed to see the 40-minute train ride, we needed to see where our characters went, what happened after this. Like, the moment that this film ends on is such a beautiful and just kind of moment that just makes you, again, you already kind of were falling in love with these characters, and this final moment of just knowing that, you don't know what the future holds for them, but they got 40 more minutes, and you know that from what you've seen, their chemistry is there. And again, Kay says they're not going to resolve anything in 40 minutes, but you have a good feeling that they probably will. So again, Desert Hearts is one that I knew nothing about this film going in, and I'm really glad that I found it. Portrait of a Lady on Fire. On an isolated island in Brittany at the end of the 18th century, a female painter is obliged to paint a wedding portrait of a young woman. Portrait of a Lady on Fire was released in 2019 and was directed by Celine Sciamma. The film stars Noémie Merlant, Adèle Haenel, and Luana Bajrami. Now, this was the most obvious entry in there, and once I said that 3 of the 4 left the Letterboxd for from the beginning, you kind of probably knew this one was going to be safe if you're familiar with my channel at all, because I've talked about multiple times on my channel now how much I love Portrait of a Lady on Fire. In fact, I did a whole episode in my another Letterboxd series that I have on this channel on the film, so I'm going to put the link to that video in the description if you want to go watch my full thoughts on how much I love Portrait of a Lady on Fire. But a lot of the reason that I love Portrait of a Lady on Fire is a lot of the similar reasons of why I like Desert Hearts. Portrait of a Lady on Fire is just this very intimate story, just full of absolute beautiful lines of dialogue, very romantic. The line that always has kind of just stood out to me from the film is, like, the one that made my heart stop the first time watching it was I believe it's Adèle Haenel's character is asking, I wish I had the exact quote memorized, but something about, like, do all lovers feel like they're creating something, like, when they're in love? Do they always feel like they're creating something? And there's just so many lines like that. The other thing with this film too that is just very strong and very beautiful is the love isn't always portrayed through the dialogue. Oftentimes, especially in the first, I would say, 2/3 of this film, it is the love is portrayed through glances. It is portrayed through stealing looks, and a lot of this is because of the situation that they're in, where we've got one character who is a bride to be, that is kind of being forced into a marriage that she doesn't really want to be in, and it's custom at this time to commission someone to make a portrait of the bride. And then we've got this painter coming into the island who has to make this portrait without being seen, because again, the bride to be doesn't want to be married, so she doesn't want to sit down and have her portrait taken. And so, in order for our painter here to be able to make this portrait, she has to kind of steal a lot of glances. She has to kind of take good looks and memorize the details of her face and memorize so many things. And so, you just get these moments where she is staring for, a long time, and, essentially it is to do her job to, again, memorize all these very intimate details in order to kind of go back to her room and be able to make this painting. But really, as the film goes on, you realize it's not just someone just, trying to do her best to just get this perfect portrait, as much as it is someone that is just in love and falling for this person and falling for the beauty that she is seeing. And so it's a lot of these kind of quick looks, and it's, so many times in this film where she's kind of taking these quick looks, and obviously, Adele Haenel's character obviously notices Noemi Merlan's character kind of staring at her, so you're kind of cutting back and forth with who's looking at who. And so you get a lot of this in the first act, maybe even a little bit into the second act. And I mentioned this, in the Brokeback Mountain section, where I talked about how Portrait of a Lady on Fire is much more of a slow burn, and that really is what this is. It is something that it is deliberately paced. It's very, it takes its time, and it's kind of the end of the second act, beginning of the third act of this film is when you finally get to the romance, because so much of this is just building these characters and building the situation. And once you get to that third act, once the romance hits, it is just like fireworks. It is just it's explosive, it's intense, it's beautiful, it's breathtaking, it's very quick. And like a lot of this, a lot of these kind of stories about this time period in these, gay or lesbian or queer relationships, you kind of get to the end and you realize that this is kind of a fleeting thing, that this isn't going to last, this isn't something that just can't be. And so you just get this full swing of emotions with this film, where you're falling in love with the characters as they're falling in love with themselves, and then you experience everything in the final third act of this film, the highs, the lows, everything that happens there in that final third act. You're feeling it with them because you feel like you're a part of that relationship as you watch this film. So, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, it is so beautiful. I absolutely love this film. It is one of my, it was in my Letterboxd, my true Letterboxd for so long. That is how much I love this film. It is just beautiful, and if you haven't seen it, you owe it to yourself to check out Portrait of a Lady on Fire. To Wong Fu, thanks for everything, Julie Newmar. Manhattan drag queens Vita Bohemi and Noxima Jackson impress regional judges in competition, securing berths in the Nationals in Los Angeles. When the two meet pathetic drag novice Chichi Rodriguez, one of the losers that evening, the charmed Vita and Noxima agree to take the hopeless youngster under their joined wing. Soon, the three set off on a madcap road trip across America and struggle to make it to Los Angeles in time. To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, was released in 1995 and was directed by Bebin Kidron. The film stars Patrick Swayze, Wesley Snipes, and John Leguizamo. Now, this is one that I had heard the title. I was aware of the film's existence, but I don't think I really knew anything about the film. Outside of, again, other than seeing it occasionally, someone I follow on Letterboxd logs it or something, and kind of seeing the poster or things like that. But again, I just wasn't super familiar with the film. Again, this is one that was a recommendation in Alonso Duralde's book, and I wrote it down. I was interested in it, but I didn't. I can't remember. He probably does talk about it in his book. He probably talks about who the actors are that are playing these drag queens, but I didn't remember it when I started the film. And so I was watching the film, and I don't remember. There probably was opening credits, and I probably just wasn't paying attention because I kind of went into this pretty blindly, didn't recognize the names. And as the film's starting, I recognized Patrick Swayze pretty quickly. That I was kind of like, I think that's Patrick Swayze. It took me a second to kind of, because I'm just not super familiar with Wesley Snipes, but eventually, I kind of pretty quickly picked up on that. I'm the most familiar of these three actors with John Leguizamo. I did not know it was John Leguizamo until about midway through the film, when I think I kind of saw a glance and I had to look it up because I was like, is that John Leguizamo? And I had to look it up, and it totally is. And I saw a review of this film, someone on Letterboxd, and I wish I remembered exactly what it was, but they said essentially that that Wesley Snipes is playing a woman, Patrick Swayze is portraying a woman, and John Leguizamo is a woman in this film. He is phenomenal. John Leguizamo is an actor that I think I've seen. He's one of those actors that I've seen a ton of. Like, he's in so many movies that I've seen, but he kind of is these side characters or bit parts. I don't know if I've really seen anything where he's kind of like as much of a lead as he is in this film. But John Leguizamo is one of those actors that I don't know if I ever like even had an opinion. It's not like I didn't like him or liked him. Like, I had no opinion on like what I thought of him as an actor. But this is by far the best performance I've seen him give, and he is phenomenal in this film. Like, he is so excellent as Chichi Rodriguez in this film. Now, to Wong Fu, thanks for everything, Julie Newmar. This is a film that, I was kind of debating whether I wanted to kind of look into it and see if there was kind of controversies surrounding, three straight actors playing these drag queens. I was assume there probably is some controversy. There's probably something there, but I'm, for the most part, as much as I believe in getting representation, and they're probably, maybe they could have had some actual drag queens kind of playing these characters. I still think that, especially like going back and watching older films, I'm not going to hold this against, the actors that are in the film that are portraying these characters, like, especially when they're doing it as well as these three are. Like, these three are, they're giving earnest performances, they're giving, like, these aren't insensitive performances at all. They are earnestly playing these characters, and they are really kind of bringing these characters and the story to life, to the screen. They're, like, again, it is a very, I think, a respectful telling of this story. And so I didn't really look up too much to see if there was, a whole lot of controversy on that, because I fell in love with these characters, and I fell in love with the film in general. It is a very kind of beautiful story of seeing this adventure that they go on, and again, this is one that I initially, just kind of reading or hearing the premise and probably hearing Alonso talk about it in his book, I kind of thought that this was maybe because it kind of leads you under the impression that it's this cross-country road trip. And so, I thought they were going to stop here, stop here, stop here, and they were going to different hijinks in every single city that they're stopping at on the way to Los Angeles. But I thought it was going to be a thing they would come in, be in a city for a little bit, something would happen, they'd leave, and then we're just kind of quickly moving on. And I thought it was just going to be this, like, slapstick, just very quick, rapid-fire jokes as we're going across the country. But really what happens is they end up in this kind of, not ghost town is the word I'm looking for, but just kind of a real small town, probably a town that maybe isn't very progressive in terms of, what their opinions would be of drag queens. And so it's a whole lot of them trying to keep this, especially for Chi-Chi, for her character specifically, trying to keep this secret. But you see the relationship that all of our characters here are gaining with all of the different people in this little small town. And for me, that, I think, is ultimately what won me over in the film. Again, this is another film that, as it was starting, there was a whole lot of kind of these moments. You get a quick, like, Robin Williams cameo at the beginning of the film, and you get all of these different things where I'm kind of watching it, and I'm like, oh, okay, haha, it's this funny little comedy. And then it hits this moment with this town, and it's the majority of the movie is taking place here in this town. It turned from just kind of being, haha, all these jokes, into a very beautiful and very, not like full-on waterworks, crying, but still a very touching and emotional story. And you get to see the different lives that all of these, especially the ladies of this town, the lives that that they're living here. And you see kind of how, each of our drag queens here, how they're able to, kind of branch off depending, on the groups, and how they're able to provide some support or some advice or something to just kind of help certain specific characters. And each one kind of has their own little group or their own pocket that they're kind of, helping here. And especially, with like with Wesley Snipes' character, they're more kind of like talking to the boys, and I should, to say the boys of this town, that they're kind of these trying to rough things up, and they don't play by the rules, and they don't, they do this and this, and they don't care, and they're catcalling all the women and all this thing, and so she kind of does, it's very kind of, it's not as fleshed out as some of the other character development, but she is very kind of quick and assertive with them, and is able to kind of corral them. But then you get Patrick Swayze's character, he's got a couple of the different girls that he's helping them. I mean, really, the mother-daughter of this town, helping them through their problems with an abusive husband. You got Chi-Chi, who's kind of got a little bit different of a story, where she's kind of falling in love with this guy, but she's able to kind of still kind of help another character with some relationship stuff. And again, it's just this beautiful thing of seeing this town that, again, you would expect them to not necessarily be the most progressive or be the most accepting to really kind of any members of the LGBTQ community at this time. Because I can't remember when this takes place, but I mean, the film is in what did I say, the 90s, 1995. So I don't know if it takes place in 1995, but again, it's still an early enough film to where, again, this town's probably not super welcoming of them, again, of just anyone in the LGBTQ community, let alone a group of, drag queens that are coming in. And so to see the hearts of how they're able to just win over this town, win over this city, and then they have their back at the end of the film when, I don't want to spoil too much about what's going on with that subplot, but someone's coming looking for them, and they all have their back. And it's just this film that, as it was going on, I kind of, again, in my head was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I really, I know I like it. I don't know if I love it. And then it just kind of gets to the end of this film, and my heart was just warm. I just had a great time with this film. I was very kind of touched by it. And this is really the fun of this series, is, again, 3 films that I hadn't seen before. One that I knew I would like in Brokeback Mountain, but 2, this one here, To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, and Desert Hearts, 2 films that I didn't really know much about. I was able to watch them this month, and they both kind of gave me that same warm, loving feeling that it's the beauty of cinema. It's the beauty of seeing these stories, and especially stories for me personally as a straight man. I don't necessarily consume a whole lot of drag queen content, and so going into this film, again, not knowing exactly where I'm going to fall, if it's something that I'm really interested in, and then instead just getting this cinematic piece of art that is just beautiful and emotional and just touches you in the right ways, that you really just kind of fall in love with not only this film but just cinema in general. And that is, I think, just again, the beauty of this series is just falling in love with film. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of the films that I talked about here in this episode, or what some of your favorite LGBTQ films are. I would love to, this is one of those things that in all of these where I have a theme, where June's Pride Month, it's not like as soon as it flips to July, I'm just not watching any LGBTQ films anymore, So if you suggest anything in the comments that I didn't get to, I would still love to check those out and see what some of your favorites are. In the next couple days or so, I will upload the video for July's theme. If you've noticed, I do kind of have some trends going on. Obviously, we did Black History Month in February, we did Pride Month here, we did sports, in March for March Madness. There is a theme, so I wonder if you can kind of guess maybe what the theme is here for July. I feel like it's maybe one of the more obvious themes, but again, that video should be coming out in the next couple days. And if you would like to like this video and then subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that video or any future videos on this channel, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.